Forget about the NSA. Your local police department is already spying on you just as much as the federal government. LA Weekly reports Los Angeles and Southern California police are expanding their use of surveillance technology, such as intelligent video analytics, digital biometric identification, and military pedigree software for analyzing and predicting crime. Information on the identity and movements of millions of Southern California residents is being collected and tracked, whether they've committed a crime or not. LA and most U.S. cities are enjoying a huge drop in violent crime, so setting up this technology has nothing to do with stopping crime. It has everything to do with implementing a total surveillance panopticon, a high-tech control grid. But much like the article's picture suggests, it's luring readers down one path of this surveillance maze by exposing license plate scanners while avoiding the true culprit, fusion centers. More than 70 were created across the country in the aftermath of 9/11 to spy on Americans and act as a funnel to the federal government. While being sold to the public as a vital defense to defeating al-Qaeda, we reported in 2008 how these fusion centers were actually a tool for the implementation of the control grid. Fusion centers bring together the FBI, DHS, FEMA, CIA, and state and local law enforcement, all of them using a networked system developed by DARPA and the Pentagon. Fusion centers have access to records about Americans' locations, financial holdings, associates, relatives, firearms licenses, wage and property records, and government files that include criminal justice information and traffic tickets. The now notorious MIAC report identified supporters of Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, and Bob Barr as potential terrorists. Also, patriot groups, constitutionalists, pro-life advocates, and anyone displaying political bumper stickers were labeled as potentially dangerous domestic terrorists. In response, former DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano issued a defensive clarification saying, "We are on the lookout for criminal and terrorist activity, but we do not, nor will we ever, monitor ideology or political beliefs." In fact, monitoring the ideology and political beliefs of Americans is precisely the agenda of the DHS and federalized fusion centers. According to the 2009 Virginia Terrorism Threat Assessment, terrorism is defined as politically motivated violence or threat of violence. They say each of these groups holds particular values and political goals, and thus represents a different type of threat to Virginia and the U.S. A Florida fusion center surveilled Ron Paul in his campaign for liberty in 2010. In 2013, an Arkansas fusion center admitted it spies on anti-government groups, and a Tennessee fusion center put the ACLU on a terror list because the legislative lobbying organization warned schools to ensure holiday celebrations are inclusive. In other words, these fusion centers aren't meant to thwart al-Qaeda. They're meant to spy on the American people and anyone holding an anti-government opinion. Congress has a 9% approval rating, which means 91% of the American people could be potentially on this fusion center watch list. The ACLU warned back in 2007 that fusion centers posed grave threats to Americans' privacy and civil liberties, and that they needed clear guidelines and independent oversight. Well, despite violating the constitutional rights of millions of Americans, the government has opted not to inform Congress or the public of serious problems plaguing its fusion centers and broader intelligence efforts, instead allowing them to operate with no privacy guidelines or restrictions. Last month, a fusion center whistleblower leaked audio from inside a board meeting. There they were discussing the effect a new piece of legislation could have on operations. During the Austin Regional Intelligence Center's December 13th meeting, the group's law enforcement expert is heard expressing concerns regarding the newly drafted Michael Morton Act.
That was a call I got this morning from the U.S. Attorney's Office as far as the DA's office in Houston. They're thinking the Morton bill means you can't wall off anymore.
Wall off is a tip provided to law enforcement from information generated within a fusion center or from a confidential informant. Now, in some cases where probable cause does not exist, police have been known to create it. For example, law enforcement steals the license plate off a vehicle they know to possess drugs and then pulls the suspected vehicle over for violation of no license plate. The act of creating probable cause is then concealed from police reports, making it appear the case began with a traffic stop, when it really began with an inside tip.
It goes on all the time. I'm not going to tell you what I know, but law clearly says that the only complaint that the defendant could possibly have would be if he did not have probable cause to stop my car for an arrestable offense.
The defendant and his legal team are unable to adequately defend their case because they cannot know to ask to review any potential sources of exculpatory evidence, information that could reveal entrapment, mistakes, or biased witnesses. Perhaps one of the most interesting questions derived from this leaked Fusion Center audio is who exactly has access to the data besides law enforcement. ERIC's website clearly states that their analytical focus includes multiple law enforcement jurisdictions and private sector businesses responsible for the area's critical infrastructure and key resources. These include chemical, commercial facilities, communications, critical manufacturing, defense industrial base, emergency services, energy, financial, food and agriculture, healthcare and public information, IT, nuclear reactors, transportation, and water and wastewater systems. Under this definition, nearly anyone in the private business sector could potentially access Fusion Center reports, including large financial institutions. StoryLeak reported on Bank of America's secret spying relationships with several federal agencies earlier this year. A leaked email details a conversation between Bank of America's Global Corporate Security VP, Kim Triplett Kollerick, the Washington State Patrol, and one other redacted recipient. Discussing the then upcoming anonymous Million Mask March at the state's capital, Kollerick details the bank's superior ability to track political groups. The email reads, "If you find any intel on anarchists or Occupy protesters, please let me know. I will most likely find it first, as social media trolling is not what the WSP does best. Bank of America has a team of 20 people, and that's all they do all day, and then pass it to us around the country." Page 12 of the public records release, which details an October email exchange, also shows the bank's relationship with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Sorry for not getting back to you sooner. Hectic weeks lately with foreclosures and this Million Mask March. And this is just one example of the government using private groups to spy on Americans. The Stingray cell tracking device works by mimicking a real cell phone tower, tricking phones into connecting to it. Florida police have used the Stingray device at least 200 times without a warrant. Through a recent motion for public access, the ACLU determined that at least one Florida police department never told judges about its use of Stingray because the department signed a non-disclosure agreement with the Stingray's manufacturer to keep its use from being publicly known. The manufacturer further aided in the secrecy by retaining ownership of its Stingrays and only letting the department borrow them. These businesses, combined with the government, form a state corporate nexus that is continuously focusing its surveillance not on a real threat, but rather on freedom-loving Americans who counter unconstitutional abuses. Pick up a copy of Police State 4: Rise of FEMA at InfoWarsShop.com to learn just how out of control this police state panopticon has gotten. That's at InfoWarsShop.com. And remember, you're not going to hear about this from the mainstream media. They view you as no more than a rat in a maze to be lured with cheesy disinfo.
The globalist social engineers are not just targeting us with propaganda. They are manipulating our genetics. We are being targeted at every level by estrogen mimickers that lower our testosterone and other hormones and natural compounds that the body needs. After consulting top doctors, nutritionists, pharmacists, and others, we have developed what I believe is the ultimate non-GMO organic super male vitality formula sourced from powerful organic herbs and then concentrated for maximum potency. Super Male Vitality was developed to activate your body's own natural processes instead of using synthetic chemicals. Super Male Vitality by InfoWars Life is so powerful that I only take half the recommended dose. For a limited time, we are offering 15% off Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com to introduce you to this powerful supplement. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today to secure your Super Male Vitality. InfoWarsLife.com.